Hi, welcome to Brilliant But Lazy. I'm your host, Alan Cram. Josh Howell could not be with me today, but we have a little bit of a different episode for you guys this week. Brilliant But Lazy is part of the Victims and Villians podcast network, and Victims and Villians does a lot of mental health and suicide prevention work through pop culture. And we were able to take part in a panel at the GalaxyCon in Richmond, Virginia at the end of March, where Josh Burkey and I talked about Batman and mental health. So we have that panel for you today. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, we did not have video for the panel because the video guy, me, was taking part in the panel. So I was not able to record this, but we do have the audio for you. So I hope you enjoy that. I hope you get something out of this panel. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who came out. Thank you for listening. And without further ado, take it away past me and Josh.
So let's go ahead and let's get the awkward introductions out of the way. My name is Josh. I am the president and the head, the horror head of the Richmond nonprofit Victims and Villians. We were here last year. We did Spider-Man and mental health. But this is a good friend of mine. He is on our board of directors. He is also the host of our pop culture podcast, Brilliant But Lazy, Alan Cram.
Hi, guys.
So I'm actually kind of curious how many people were here last year for Spider-Man and mental health? Cool.
Don't everyone stand up at once.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Well, I hope you guys like Batman. Yeah. Because we are having conversations like this, we are deconstructing the stigma surrounding mental health. So let's jump back into trivia real quick. And can anybody, actually, if you answer this question, you have to come up because I want everyone to hear this. But what is the actual source? What is the actual source that powers Bane? All right, what do you got?
Venom.
Do you know where Venom got its comic book debut?
Like what year? Early 90s.
All right, so what comic book series did... Oh, hi, Anna.
Hi.
That's Alan's wife.
Yeah.
And his family, really, so, hey. Venom, yes. So for those of you guys, how many of you guys know that Bane wasn't the introduction to Venom in the comics? Cool. All right. All right. Yeah. I'm not used to talking about comics. So typically, it's movies with me.
So the reason he brings this up is it's one of a few weeks ago, Josh and I got together and talked about what do we want to talk about during this panel, and we came up with a reading list. And one of the things on the list that Josh assigned me to read that I read for the first time is a story arc called Batman Venom. It's part of the Legend of the Dark Knight run.
Danny O'Neill.
In the 80s.
Yes.
And it's the introduction of the Venom into the DC universe. And it's the origins of what gives Bane his powers, I guess. Correct?
It is. So it's really interesting. How many of you guys in this room have ever failed in your life? Can I get some volunteers to just shout out or come up here and just tell me what that actually had on your effect on your mental health? How did failure affect your mental health? So I'll take 2 or 3 people if you guys want to come up here and just be vulnerable for a second. 1, 2, 3, let's go. All right, I love your green hair, by the way. Tell me about a time that you failed and how it impacted your mental health.
I feel like I'm failing right now and it's affecting my mental health. I had hernia surgery 2 weeks ago. And after not really being able to go to the bathroom for 4 days or sleep during that time, I had my first panic attack in my life. And then another one later that same night. And I've kind of been having some ongoing anxiety since then.
I'm sorry to hear that. You want to take this? This will give you a QR code to our mental health resource library where you can hopefully get some resources and understand that first off, you're not alone. I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that. But thank you for your vulnerability. Give it up for him. All right, what do you got?
All right, so back when I was 25, I was a brick mason, built a company. I was doing really well, broke my back. My stepbrother died of a drug overdose, and my stepfather died of stage 3 cancer. all within a year, and I just crumbled. And I wouldn't get help for the longest time until I got forced. Finally went to the doctor. They got me on stuff I needed to be on, and I'm finally rebuilding my life.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. He has an excellent beard too. You know, I'm a beard enthusiast, so hello.
Hey. So I tried to get into medical school to become a doctor. That did not happen. And I think what's mostly done for me is, one, made me rethink about where I want to go with my life, but kind of also made me fall back into a lot of my introverted, antisocial kind of tendencies of just staying comfortable in my room, watching anime and reading comic books, which has been very lonely, especially when you move from your hometown for the job that you end up getting. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability, and in case you knew, our mental health resource library. Please do me a favor, and if you guys see this guy, this gent at the con the rest of the day, give him a hug, give him a high five, let him know that he has value and he has worth. So the reason that I bring that up is because failure is because the beginning of this story arc, Batman finds himself at the epitome of failure, where he essentially went to try and rescue a child from drowning, and she ended up dying. And so in the midst of his failure, he quite literally, as you had said, like, it literally crumbled, and it kind of broke him. Very similar to how all of you guys shared your stories of just the weight of life coming down. And, well, Batman turns to drugs.
Yes.
In this one.
So Batman turns to a prototype drug that is the origin of Venom in the DC universe. Just because the reason he wasn't able to save the girl is he just wasn't strong enough. He couldn't lift a boulder of like 600 and some pounds. Well, I forget what it was exactly. But he takes this pill and he's able to lift twice that. So he becomes addicted to this pill and starts isolating himself from Alfred and the GCPD, and just becomes a shell of the Batman that we know.
Yeah, there's a point in this story too that he like ultimately becomes so just involved in himself and involved in what he has going on that as he's isolating himself away from the GCPD, Alfred, and like the people, the Bat family as a whole, he actually ends up also becoming like somewhat of like a low-level like mob muscle to an extent as well, because he like gets involved with some pretty shady people to like keep his habit going.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. If you haven't checked it out, it's called Batman Venom. You can find the trade paperback, it's probably downstairs somewhere.
Tell them Victims and Villians sent you. Maybe you'll get a discount.
Probably not.
Can't guarantee.
Can't promise that. But it's interesting because going back to the Green Arrow in the room, I knew there was a Green Arrow drug addiction storyline. I never knew there was a Batman one. And not many people have the capability of what Batman does to get off of the drugs, which was lock himself in the Batcave for 2 months. So that's another thing that we have resources for on our website. We do have.
We have that resource library will get you anything from bullying resources to drug addiction, mental health, suicide prevention, Trevor Project, the National Suicide Veteran Hotline, the traditional 988, which is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. But the reason that when we started talking about the stories that we wanted to talk about today, the reason that I felt like Venom was so important was because of the themes that it goes through. And you bring up the isolation. How many of you guys have ever struggled in addiction? And when I say addiction, I don't just mean drugs, the traditional, I mean anything from video games, Netflix, comic books, anime, pornography. Can I get some more volunteers that are willing to share their own struggle with addiction? In the back right there. Come on up. Yes. Please, come on up. You want to give him your mic?
Yeah, I'll give him a
Since I picked all the people from this side, since all the people from this side came up last time.
All right, so here you go.
So just share my.
Yeah, just share like a little bit of like your brief history with addiction.
So my brief history was with alcohol. For me, it pretty much started as, I got off work, just want to relax, just want to chill. Nothing big, right? Not a big deal. Until I realized that coming home after work, that was the only way I could relax and the only way I can chill. I had to have, the bottle of wine. Eventually, it got to a point where it was what I needed to relax. So it was not so much, just a chill and relax thing. It became more of a dependent, like I had to have it in order to relax, which eventually led to its own issues. So ultimately, I was able to get to a point where I was able to find some other coping mechanisms that didn't involve alcohol. Still working through that because I didn't even realize that alcohol actually, it wasn't even so much just to relax after a long day of work. I even realized sometimes cleaning my house it was a trigger for me because I would drink a glass of wine and clean my house. I mean, just so many different things you would think it just is relaxing. I needed alcohol to do that, and so it didn't work out too well. But now I'm here 3 years sober. So.
That's awesome. Give it up for her, please. I am convinced that sobriety is one of the hardest things to achieve and to keep clean in this lifetime. So thank you so much.
All right, you're up.
All right. Well, I have a family full of alcoholics, and I kind of strayed away from alcohol, or I was cautious with alcohol, and I thought that made me safe. Whew, I was wrong. I fell in love with pills, and I had a baby, and postpartum hit me really hard, and I don't know. It's like when you find something you like. When you want to do it just, randomly, it's fine, but then all of a sudden you find something you like and there's a dealer every corner, it seems like. But anyways, I eventually got tired. You kind of have to be ready to get clean. You can't do it for anybody else. And I eventually got there, probably about 7 years afterwards. And I went into a program. I was very anti-AA, so that was one of the things that stopped me from going for a very long time. But once I got into a program, I realized that there were so many other support groups out there. I did Smart Recovery, which was really good for me. I'm anti-AA, but whatever, if it works for you, it's whatever works. I don't know, I didn't count my days. I couldn't tell you how long I've been clean, but at least 5 years now.
Yeah, give it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Philip Ball, and I still struggle with addiction. So my mom is still currently an alcoholic, and growing up with her, I was constantly exposed around alcohol. And joining the Army, there's a huge community around drinking alcohol, and finding good influences in that social hemisphere that I'm in is really hard. So I still struggle with alcohol addiction, and going in here in front of everybody, I hope these are the steps I can take to get better.
All right.
Yes, please. And so it's stories like those three brave people. I'm sure that there are many more stories in this room that sound like that are along those similar lines, and that's really what we see Batman go through in this story. And this was such a different side of him, because I feel like one of the most iconic, probably one of my favorite panels, is from The Dark Knight Returns, where he holds up a gun and he basically says only cowards use this tool, or something to that extent. And as your niece tries to hand you a gun. No. Cool. Nephew, sorry. It's hard to see from this angle. But yeah. But Batman's always kind of had this like really strict moral code. So like seeing him struggle with addiction was probably like, as a lifelong Batman fan, is one of the hardest things that I've ever seen him go through.
It's a very powerful story. It's probably the most powerful one that we talked about before the panel, that we're going to talk about in the panel. So I highly recommend it if you can find it. It's a great read.
How many of you guys have library cards in Richmond? All right, so cool. There's this awesome app called Hoopla, and you can download it on there. All you need to sign up for is a library card, and you can read Batman Venom for free.
Yeah.
So, it's a whole storyline. It's collected in a graphic novel. It's a great storyline. I highly recommend it.
It takes place early in Batman's career because Harvey Dent is still the DA. He gets a name drop at one point. So it's one of the things that the Legend of the Dark Knight does is it jumps around the timeline a bit. And it tells us, so the story's a little bit earlier in his career, before Robin, and Harvey's still DA. He only has one face, so.
I'm just thinking of Pete Holmes and those Batman videos. Harvey Dent. Can he be trusted? Let's get a little bit personal and controversial. Let's talk about favorite on-screen Batman. I think you've already shown your hand.
Yeah, with the Val Kilmer scene. So.
Yes. Anyone fans of Val Kilmer in here? Cool. What? Kilmer. What'd you say?
I'm a fan of Willow. Does that count?
Yeah, we'll count.
Sure,
that.
we'll take that.
Iceman also too, you know.
So, can anyone tell me why it's called Batman Forever? Does anybody know why they have that title?
Because the movie is about Batman coming to terms with why he's still Batman.
Did you read the script?
Maybe.
Okay. I was gonna say it's in the screenplay. It's not in the movie. There's a whole sequence in the movie that was cut, and one of the things that we have up here. Can we get Black Canary and Green Arrow up here to read a scene from Batman Forever?
Oh, Gandalf is here. Sorry, I didn't mean to name drop, you know. It's kind of a big deal for a big celebrity like you to be here.
Josh, you want to get yours?
Yeah.
So, in the film, there's a... That's okay. We'll set this up a little bit. So in the film, Bruce Wayne has a lot of dreams about this red book, but they never tell you what's in the red book. In this deleted scene, you find out what is in that book. Yes, you're going to be Bruce. You're going to be Chase. And you're going to read to the next page right here. So I'll read the scene directions for you. Let me just pull it up here. Interior Wayne Manor study, a long beat. Then Bruce Wayne surrenders, leans back, and closes his eyes. Remembers.
My parents are laid out in the library. Their skin smells like talcum powder. I'm so small. My father's diary is on his desk like always. I'm opening the book, reading. I'm running out into the storm. The book is in my hands. I can't hear my screams over the rain. I'm falling.
What does it say, Bruce? What hurts so much, Bruce? What does the book say?
I don't...
You do know. Try.
Bruce opens his eyes. Clear. He remembers.
The last entry read, Bruce insists on seeing a movie tonight.
A beat.
Bruce insists. I made them go out. I made them take me to the movie, to that theater. It was my fault. I killed them.
Oh God, Bruce, you were a child. You weren't responsible.
Not the bat?
What?
I always thought that it was the bat that scared me that night that changed my life. But it wasn't. The real fear was hiding underneath. What I read in the journal, that my parents' deaths were my fault. That's what I couldn't remember. That's the crime I've been paying for all these years.
What are you talking about?
Chase, there's something I need to tell you.
All right, let's give him a hand for Bruce and Chase.
Thank you, guys.
So if you're going to hear that in the back, what the diary says is Bruce insists on going to the movies tonight. So Bruce Wayne thinks that he is responsible for him and his parents being out the night that they ultimately die. which is not in the movie, and has a big impact on the origins of Batman himself. And there is a later scene in the movie where Bruce finds the book again after the Riddler comes in and does his dance in the Batcave and blows up the Batmobile. Bruce goes back into the Batcave and where he fell and saw the bats for the first time, and he finds the book. Josh, do you want to read the stage directions, and I'll take my turn at being Bruce Wayne?
Oh. Where are you at? Are you at the
second
Bruce
page.
POV?
Yes.
Bruce POV, a narrow chute. The fall he took as a child, he kneels there on the floor, worn by years of weather, a single book, a diary. Bruce kneels, touches the front cover, fingers lingering for a moment on his father's embossment, before he turned the yellow pages to the last entry. Painfully by moonlight, he reads.
Bruce insists on seeing a movie tonight.
He pauses, gathers himself, he continues.
But Martha and I have our hearts set on Zorro, so Bruce's cartoon will have to wait until next week.
Bruce stares at the book in disbelief. Then he looks up at the moonlight, tears streaming down his face.
Not my fault. It wasn't my fault.
Suddenly in the dark ahead, a dark shape moves ahead, rising. Slit opening to reveal two blood-red eyes. The giant monarch bat spreads its wings huge as it rises, suddenly airborne, rushing towards him.
So when the script says giant monarch bat, they actually filmed this. You can see the clip online of Val Kilmer doing like a spin around with this man-sized bat, and it looks ridiculous, and that's probably why they cut all of this from the film. But you can find this online. It is there. I think this has such a better impact on the movie as a whole, because it takes away the whole why is it Batman Forever? Why is the third Batman entry called Batman Forever? With this storyline, it makes sense, but without it, it loses a lot of the heart and the soul behind the story. Instead, it's just Jim Carrey, and I love Batman Forever, don't get me wrong, but it's just Jim Carrey running around in tights.
Whoa.
In
Jim Carrey is, up until last year, was the best Riddler we had.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just to also kind of go off that, like, if you guys have a chance, like, and you guys happen to be either like in like a secondhand bookstore, or find it on Amazon, or just like Google original script, or Peter David wrote a novelization of it, and it, like, the script completely changes this really divisive film, and it kind of it feels almost a little bit more like a psychological thriller, because it definitely deep dives into Bruce's own mental health journey of losing his parents.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense why the love interest for the film is a psychiatrist. Nicole Kidman, before she was locked into AMC Theater.
Hey, heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
Yeah. But yeah, there's another thing that I want to talk about from those Batman movies, because there's a lot of disconnect between Batman Returns and Batman Forever, because you jump from Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer, but there's a through line for those stories that makes sense and talks a lot about what Bruce Wayne's mental health is between the films. And let me just pull up my notes here so I get this right.
All right, so you pull that up real quick, and I will chime in here. Bruce Wayne is a really interesting character when you're talking about mental health, because he kind of takes a lot of the failures that are around him really personally. I think you see that's the reason why he takes up the cape and the cowl. We also read Death in the Family for this one, and you kind of see how Jason Todd's death affects his own mental health, and kind of that failure as well. Before, I'm gonna cue up a layup for you.
Okay.
I don't know if I got that basketball.
Amazing.
I don't know if I got that basketball reference right. I'm not a sports guy. But how many of you guys have ever felt like the weight of like someone else's failure that you've kind of taken on as yourself? If I can get 3 people up here that'll run up here, just surprise me, whoever the 3 people are, and then we could give it over to you. No one wants to share? Does anybody... Yeah. Anyone else take the weight of someone else's failure and kind of just how that affected your mental health? I got one.
If we only have one, we only have one.
Yeah, if we only have one, that's cool. It's cool. I know mental health is something that's like really hard to talk about, so like that's why we're here trying to talk about it with you guys. So I am gonna let him go real quick.
No, you go ahead. I think can wait.
Your conspiracy theory. Okay.
No, it's not a conspiracy theory.
All right. How are you doing today?
I think my biggest failing with my own mental health and taking on somebody else's burden would definitely be towards my mother. And my mom became the voice of my worst critic because no matter how good I did or what I succeeded in, even in college, she would take credit for everything. It was all about her, and if I didn't do something well, then I was a complete failure and didn't even deserve her attention. So that was definitely an impact.
Are you? Yeah, thank you. Do you still find yourself going through those stuff?
No, actually, since becoming a published author, because that's something my mother could never do was write, I've kind of twisted that into myself of, yeah, I really can do this, and there's nothing she can do or say to take this away from me because I'm published now. I have my own name.
Yeah! Look, if you guys, we do a lot of press events, and it is incredibly hard to get published. So congratulations, give it up for her. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna allow you to plug yourself real quick. So what's the book called?
Books, actually, multiple books.
All right, let's go.
I've got a couple of horror books. I've got Lament of Midnight 1 and 2, which are anthologies. I also just got published again this past year in a book called Reader's Digested. So I have a short story in that, and I'm going to be in the next 2 whenever they come out.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you so much. All right, give it up for her. Yeah. You can sit down. All right.
Thank you so much.
What stories do you have in store for us?
I have the same but opposite story. So me and my mom are really close, and she was never able to succeed in life after having me, and she just lost her job of 18 years that she got right after I was born, and that's the reason why she was able to raise me. And so now I'm off of college and I'm not home anymore, and I feel bad that I can't support her in the way she couldn't support me, but it's I know she'll be fine, but it's still hard with anxiety and everything.
All right. Yeah, therapist. Yeah. Look, before you jump over, I'm gonna connect the segues from these stories back to movies. On these notes, real quick, if you guys haven't had a chance to check out the movie Pearl, go check it out because it deals with a lot of the same things that these 2 young ladies talked about.
Okay. So, quick poll: who's excited to see Michael Keaton return as Batman?
Yeah.
All right. So I talked a little bit before about how there's a disconnect between those films, between Batman, Batman Returns, and Batman Forever. One of the things so let's go through the beats of Batman's story a little bit. End of Batman, 89. Joker dies at the hands of Batman. And then Batman Returns. Batman's a little bit more free and loose with the killing, strapping bombs to clowns' chests and then throwing them down manholes. And by the time you get to Batman Forever, when Dick Grayson finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman and can help him kill Harvey, Two-Face, to get revenge for his parents, Bruce has a whole monologue that goes through his mental health, his journey with being responsible for taking out the Joker, who was responsible for killing Bruce Wayne's parents. So Bruce says to Dick, then it will happen like this. You make the kill, but your pain doesn't die with Harvey. It grows. So you run into another night to find another face, and another, until one terrible morning you wake up and realize that revenge has become your whole life, and you don't know why. And Dick Grayson says, you can't understand, your family wasn't killed by a maniac. Bruce Wayne says, yes, they were the same. So there really is a little bit of a connection there between the Michael Keaton Batman and the Val Kilmer, because I believe up until The Flash, which comes out in June, they were a series of movies that took place in the same universe. I think The Flash is about to retcon that, but I think it's fine. Like, I don't even know if it's the same Michael Keaton Batman from the '89 film or not. Michael Keaton's Batman. I don't care. They can retcon Batman forever if they want. But there is a little bit of a journey there about how Bruce Wayne goes down this dark path, and it takes the events of seeing Selena Kyle in Batman Returns go down a similar path with Max Schreck that brings him back to the light a little bit, and when we pick up with him in Batman Forever.
Yeah, and like, I will probably say something a little controversial, but so far my favorite on-screen Batman, I love Forever, I love the '90s, but Affleck.
Yeah.
Look, I know it's controversial because of all the Snyder stuff, but I like Affleck because you're getting to see a Batman that is worn. I love the monologue that he gives to Alfred in the Batcave in BVS. He says, 20 years in Gotham, how many people like stayed good? And I think that when you are continuously exposed to failure, heartbreak, death, all of that stuff has an effect on your mental health. And if you're not actively seeking options to better yourself, you are simply digging yourself deeper into that darkness.
The night is darkest before the dawn. I think that's from a Batman movie.
That is The Dark Knight.
Yes.
Also a great movie.
Yes. Arguably so, yes.
But
what else do you want to talk about?
I think while we're talking about like failures and like dealing with failures, understanding the connection between death in the family to Under the Red Hood, the connection of here you have essentially taken in a child, you have made him your ward, taken him off the streets, kind of mentored him, and then in the long run, he becomes one of your biggest failures. I don't have kids. I don't have plans for kids, but I would imagine that if you are a parent in here and you have children, like losing your flesh and blood has to have an effect on your mental health and is probably very detrimental in the long run.
Yeah, another story that we read for this was Batman White Knight. Who here is familiar with the White Knight storyline? Okay. There's a brief mention, so real quick, just a brief overview of it. The story is pretty much what would happen if the Joker took his meds. And Jack Napier is a advocate for Gotham and steps up and works with the GCPD to help rid the city of crime. And there's a moment between Jack Napier and Batman where Batman says, "What happened to Jason? Like, tell me what happened that night." And he pretty much tells him, "He told me what I wanted to know, and then he just walked away. Like, I never killed him. He just walked away because he hated you that much." So there was a lot of toxic. There was a big toxic relationship between Jason Todd and Bruce Wayne, where he's like, "I hate Bruce Wayne," and just leaves Gotham and leaves the life behind. Yeah. So I think that's something to say about his mental health as well, because not that child-parent relationship might not always be the healthiest, and sometimes the best thing to do might be to just walk away.
Yeah, and Titans, I think. I know there are kids in here, so I won't say the line, but the very first teaser you got of that HBO series was F Batman.
Yeah.
And you kind of see throughout the first season of Titans how it explores that very similar concept to being like, Bruce basically like turned me into a weapon and kind of really made me hate myself. And I think Damian is kind of like a good exploration of that in modern comics now, where you have a child that was essentially raised by the demon head at Ra's al Ghul, and now you are essentially throwing him into this like domestic situation with Batman. He's essentially having to learn how to be an actual boy.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what they do with the Bruce Wayne, Damian Wayne storyline in the upcoming Brave and the Bold, which will be one of the DC films coming out under the reign of James Gunn and Peter Safran.
Yeah. So let's take a break on the mental health stuff real quick. Let's lighten up the load a little bit. Who wants to do some trivia? We'll do trivia / fan casting. I want to do trivia though. I want to have one trivia question, and then we'll do some fan casting. Do you know where the name Jack Napier comes from in the comics?
No.
Does anybody know where the name Jack Napier comes from in the comics? It does by 3 years, I believe.
I think so.
Because we owe it to Mr. Alan Moore and the Killing Joke for giving us the name Jack Napier and the backstory that would loosely be used for Batman '89 and then obviously White Knight as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So we have a new Batman that's coming out in, was it 2025?
Something like that, yeah.
If you guys had a chance to, if you were in the shoes of James Gunn and Peter Safran, who would you cast as the next Caped Crusader, keeping in mind that he is going to be, he's got to be between 20 and, well, he's got to be early, like 30s, early to mid-30s, I think is what they're saying.
Old enough to have like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, so you can say 30.
Yeah.
You know. Anyone want to fan cast with us? Who would you cast?
Oh man, that's tough. I'm not a huge Supernatural fan, but I think Jason Ackles would be a good one. He might be a little older.
Jensen Ackles.
Jensen Ackles, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, not a huge Supernatural guy. So
he was Red Hood. He was also Batman in Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2.
Yeah.
He was all right as Batman. I don't know. I don't know. I have a very controversial opinion on CW shows and actors, so I will just. Yeah, I have not, but I will. The Boys is the one season I haven't caught up.
Who would you have as Batman?
You know, I've given this a lot of thought, and I go back and forth. Let me actually look up the dude's name.
You've given it a lot of thought, but you have to look it up.
I have to look up the guy's name because I've only ever seen him in one movie.
What movie?
Pearl.
Oh, okay.
So I brought up this movie earlier. How many of you guys have seen the movie Pearl? Thank you. It's a very twisted, it's essentially what would happen if you remade The Wizard of Oz as a horror movie. But the gentleman in that, David Cornsweet, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but he would be a great Batman. I think he has the look, he's got the jaw, and he's got the acting capability for it as well.
I like how the jaw became before acting capability in your qualifications.
You need to have a good jaw, Matt, my friend.
All right. What else do we want to talk about?
Who you got? Let's get some fan castings. Who you got?
So if anyone has played the wonderful game Lego Batman 2 DC Superheroes, all right, Troy Baker.
Troy Baker would be good, yeah.
I'm still waiting to see him as a live action Joker. That's the one that I want. I know he did. He does a great job.
He did both. Yeah. Okay.
That actually makes a great deal of sense.
It does. Well, the good news is by the time we get Brave and the Bold, all the Stranger Things kids will be overage for Damian Wayne, so it won't be one of them. If they had done this movie 5 years ago,
it would have been Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, it would have been Finn Wolfhard. Okay, yeah. Yes.
I would have said Kiefer Sutherland, but I think he's a little older now.
I can see him as Ra's al Ghul.
He would have been great, Ra's al Ghul.
He probably does use a Lazarus pit, so.
Yeah, I mean, you could literally cast like a 13-year-old to play Ra's al Ghul with the freaking Lazarus pit. That's a cheap. How much time we got?
What do we go to? 45?
We go to 5.
We're at 36 right now. So.
All right, cool. So we're gonna talk about the movies. I'm just gonna get a show of hands. In the era of Batman, how many fans do we have for 66? Cool.
All right.
Bat shark repellent all day long. And in the era of Keaton, Kilmer, and Clooney, how many shows hands we got? Yeah, look, it's okay. It's okay to say this is a safe zone.
Yeah.
If you like to watch Mr. Freeze do ice puns, this is a safe zone. There's no judgment. No, I'm saying if we have fans. All but the George Clooney one.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Look, it could. Never say never.
I mean, in the world of the multiverse, I'm sure maybe a cameo at some point, but maybe. He's too busy selling tequila now, though. So.
But one of the thing. All right, so Dark Knight trilogy fans, animated. Every hand went up for that. I feel like you can't go wrong with Kevin Conroy.
You can't.
God bless his soul.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I know Kevin Conroy's death was a shock to a lot of people, and we did a whole tribute to him on our YouTube channel that ended up getting lost to the ether, but
never to be seen.
Because it was his death and then Jason David Frank back to back. So like most of the lineup for Fox Kids that I grew up watching, in a matter of a few weeks, was gone, and it was a big shock. But with Victims and Villains, we had a lot of people like we had several people like on our panel talking about him, like doing a tribute to Kevin Conroy. And it was very therapeutic to just be able to pay tribute to a man who was Batman, not only in the animated series, but in the Justice League series, and then the Arkham video games. Who here's a fan of the Arkham games? There we go. Yes. And we'll get to hear his voice one more time in Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. So, if it ever comes out.
Yeah, we'll see, because it's supposed to come out next.
They keep pushing it back. They got in trouble. They got in trouble with the fan base for battle passes and stuff. So.
Yeah, Conroy is a really interesting, conversation for me, because I feel like personally, like, I don't really like look at celebrities the way that some people look at celebrities. So like, I don't really lament a lot of celebrity deaths. I think Wes Craven hit me really hard because he kind of shaped my love of the genre of horror. And Kevin Conroy and Jason David Frank were really hard, especially because, like you said, like I grew up watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Batman the Animated Series, and so like to have someone that essentially like was a part of your childhood, grew up into adulthood, because like he translated with us. Like as they grew up in the 90s, translated from Batman the Animated Series, we went to Justice League the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited. We went to all of the video games that came next, all of the animated movies, and then he's gone.
Yeah, but every comic book that I read for this panel, it's his voice that I hear. Like his voice is so iconic as Batman. His voice is just as iconic as Mark Hamill's Joker. So, and the two go side by side. So the fact that Mark Hamill is stepping away from the Joker without Kevin Conroy as Batman, I think speaks volumes to his impact on the character.
Yeah, and like one of the things that like to step outside of the realm of Batman, Jason David Frank's death was something that was extremely hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many of you guys in here have ever lost someone to suicide, but losing someone to suicide is literally like someone like stabbed you in the back and then just kind of left that there. Like it's a pain that you just essentially have to deal with, and you don't really know how to deal with because, well, suicide is the only disease that is 100% treatable. I mean, there's therapy. If you guys need any, we have mental health resources up here. But I think that Jason David Frank is like a strong reminder that even the fame and fortune that, you know, come with that, and like all the popularity, that at the end of the day, that like depression still can come for anybody. Depression holds no prejudice. So depression can literally come for you. It doesn't care of your race, your nationality, your sexual or gender identity, like what political party you identify as. It can come.
Yeah, very well said. So I think we did a good job of introducing Victims and Villains. Josh, where did the name Victims and Villains come from?
How many of you guys had it? How many, show of hands, how many of you guys have ever had depression? All right, so I want you guys to do me a favor. Leave those hands raised, and I'm going to ask you guys 2 more questions. In that time of depression, how many of you guys have ever felt like you were a victim? How many of you guys ever felt like you were a villain? That's where depression, that's where the name Victims and Villains comes from, is because depression has this way of manipulating your brain to actually see the circumstances in your life as one of those 2 camps. And if you have depression very severely, then you kind of go through both at the same time, and it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been with Victims for 3 years now. I actually got the message that I was hired on to Victims here at GalaxyCon in Richmond in 2020. I was in line to meet Michael Rosenbaum, and Josh messaged me. But it's very, all that to say, 3 years ago I joined us. I'd only heard that story from Josh on the origin of the name a few months ago, and we're like, well, we need to start promoting that. Like that's our slogan. So.
Yeah, so I would have like let anyone know that like you raised your hand and you said that like you felt like that, or maybe you currently feel like that still. Understand that you're not alone. You know, to bring it back to the Venom story arc is, I think, one of the most heartbreaking things about that is like, show of hands, how many people have ever like watched someone that they care about like go through addiction? Can you guys attest that it is one of the hardest things that you've ever seen and like experienced and like had to be a bystander as? That's probably one of the hardest things about reading it for me, is because I've had countless people in my life that have struggled with addiction, that have been that have relapsed, that have overdosed, that have just kind of like gotten clean, relapse, gotten clean, relapse. And it's one of the hardest things that you do, because like you have so many people that actually care about you and that love you and like want to see the better of you. And I think that's one of the hardest things about Venom, is that like you see that throughout the story, is that like Jim cares about him, Alfred cares about him. Alfred is constantly like the Jiminy Cricket of that story, where he's constantly speaking in and saying, hey, I just want to reaffirm your value and your purpose as Bruce Wayne, not as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne.
I don't even think it's just that story. I think Alfred is the Jiminy Cricket to Bruce Wayne in every story, whether it's the animated series where he literally draws him a bath, or Michael Caine at his graveside at The Dark Knight Rises. I think it's all the same. He's always the voice of reason, whether Bruce listens to him or not. So
yeah, on that note, like one of the most like specific sequences that come up is like just being blinded by vengeance and being blinded by the need to kill Superman in BVS. Is Alfred is like very witty in that. Jeremy Irons did a great job. But one of the things that I think is really key about that particular relationship in that film is you kind of constantly see him say, you know, if you kill Superman, what is really going to be like the end all to this? Like, what's the end game essentially?
Yeah. I just remember him chopping wood in that movie. So
poor Groot. Poor Groot.
Yeah.
Yes, in the back.
I'm thinking about Batman.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wish we had gotten to see with the Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck characters in the films, was that friendship. But you started off with them as enemies. So you didn't really get much of it in Justice League or BVS.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get to see that going forward. But yeah, you have Superman, who is the Boy Scout of the group, and then you have Bruce Wayne as Batman, who is kind of the awkward kid in the back, planning everything secretly, who needs to be brought down a little bit by Superman occasionally. So, yeah, I love that relationship, and I wish we got to see more of it on the big screen. And hopefully we will soon.
Yeah, they did a great run in the early 2000s. Michael Turner was the artist on it, just called Superman Batman. But on that note, like, I think it's really interesting too, is like when you talk about Bruce Wayne's like mental health, how much of that mental health is like actually like explored in his rogues gallery.
Yeah.
So we also read The Long Halloween, which doesn't really have a whole lot to do with mental health. But one of the more fascinating aspects of that is how that story utilizes Harvey Dent Two-Face. And Two-Face in particular is a great example of the duality between like morality, essentially.
Yeah. And Harvey Dent's one that they really like to focus on his mental health a lot, because we also read Batman Arkham Asylum, which deals with Harvey Dent's treatment at Arkham Asylum and how they treat him from going from Two-Face back to Harvey Dent. And there are some things that work and don't work with that. But he seems to be one that they focus a lot on because his mental health issues are also kind of physical with the Two-Face.
Yeah, how many of you guys have ever like gone through like depression or like anxiety or even like suicide or even like self-mutilation and like have felt like those like those like inner feelings of like depression, self-harm and stuff like that have like actually like manifested themselves physically? Oh, I love that that young lady in the back shot her hand right up. Thank you. Yeah, like I've suffered with self-mutilation when I was a teenager, and that was one of the hardest things to kind of come to grips with. In the early 2000s, they did a really great comic arc that we did not read, but if you guys want to check it out, it's called Face the Face. Basically, it's like Harvey has been restored. How much time we got?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Harvey's been restored basically to Harvey. He's no longer dealing with being Two-Face physically anymore, but he's still mentally and emotionally like dealing with being Two-Face. And I think that's so fascinating because they have these like inner monologues back and forth. And if you guys have ever gone through, let me back up before I say that. If you guys have ever actually gone through like something like that, you have to understand that like just simply going through the physical change of like therapy and stuff like that isn't like, sometimes that's just a Band-Aid, and that's the case in this one. That's what I think is really interesting about Arkham Asylum too, is that it almost kind of has that Band-Aid effect to where they're not actually healing his mental health, but they're healing simply just his outward scars.
Yeah, they deal with a lot in Arkham Asylum about, well, instead of just using a two-sided coin to make choices, let's give you a die. Let's give you a deck of tarot cards, and just giving him choices for more options, rather than just heads and tails. But what I think is really interesting about that, and spoilers for Arkham Asylum, the comic book, at the end he goes back to the coin, but does the opposite of what it says. So I think it shows a lot about his growth from going through all those different treatments, where he relies on it as a crutch, but he still is able to independently make his own choice.
Yeah, and to bring that back to a topic we've already talked about a lot, is that ultimately ends up becoming his downfall in Batman Forever in the end. But one of the things that I feel like I just want to talk about for a few moments, and while we're kind of closing it down. By the way, you guys have been a great audience, so thank you guys for those of you guys that stuck around. So much. Panels with mental health are like hit or miss. Like I did a panel a couple weeks ago when we did North Carolina, and we had 6 people. So the fact that you guys are all hanging out with me means the world. Thank you guys for being vulnerable, talking about mental health. But Two-Face is really interesting to talk about because I think he's such a glaring example of the importance of understanding that you need to fix the underlying emotional issues of trauma, not just necessarily what we have on the surface. Yes, sir.
So, tailing off Two-Face.
Yes.
My personal favorite Batman villain, Mr. Freeze.
Oh, you want to tackle Mr. Freeze?
Because, like, he is a has.
He would say it's healthy.
He would say it's healthy. A therapist might ask questions.
Yeah, Mr. Freeze is a really interesting example to talk about when you talk about mental health in like the Batman's Rogues Galleries because one of the phrases that I've heard a lot and I've used a lot in the last year is nostalgia is cancer. And it was from an independent movie I got to cover last year called Eating Miss Campbell. And one of the things that I love about that is that Mr. Freeze is such a great example because he's stuck at this moment in time where he thinks he has happiness. And I think sometimes, like, I'll be honest, man, like, my sister and I were really, really close to our grandmother growing up, and when we lost her, I never properly dealt with it for like 10 years. So, like, it really messed up my mental health, and my wife was like, when we first started dating, she was like, this is not a healthy portion of your life.
Yeah.
And so, like, I had to kind of go through that Mr. Freeze syndrome where it was like learning to like live without that person that brought me so much joy and happiness.
Yeah. Did you go through a lot of ice puns then too?
I did.
Yeah.
It was part of my therapy.
What's your favorite ice pun?
Oh, favorite ice pun. The Ice Age killed the dinosaurs.
We'll kill the dinosaurs. The Ice Age. My heart is going cold. You can please the mercy.
Ice to see you. I really love when he's like trying to figure out Poison Ivy's name.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait, let me guess. Plant lady?
Yeah.
Flower girl?
Yeah. One of my favorite moments, just another pitch for the White Knight storyline, is Mr. Freeze is in it, and at one point during the final battle, he just stops and says, "I'm all out of ice puns," and then just kicks ass.
That's
It's
amazing.
Well,
like, also, like, keeping on, how much time we got left?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right, so, yes, sir.
So what do you feel about the Joker's view on one bad day can break a person?
I mean,
That's such a loaded question, but that's how we'll answer. That's how we'll end.
So, I think it can. I think it absolutely can. But I don't think it can completely break you. I think you can always bounce back. I think that it might be a rough road, but I think you can absolutely get there. I was laid off from my job a few years ago, and it took forever. It took up until last September for me to get back into a full-time position that I actually love. But I made it there. So, like, it took time. Like, I was in a position where I was getting 5 hours a week doing what I like to do. And it just wasn't working. Like, it was a toxic work environment. I wasn't making enough money to pay the bills. But now I'm in a position with my job where I absolutely love my coworkers. I love the environment that I'm in. And it took time. But if I hadn't had that one bad day, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I think you can absolutely always bounce back from that one bad day.
Also, thanks for bringing it back to Alan Moore. Alan Moore is my favorite comic writer of all time, so I know he's kind of out there with some of his ideas, but I agree with everything that Alan said. I think that it 100% can definitely like make or break your day. Like it's all it takes is one bad day. Because, you know, how many of us like have like one bad day and there are, you know, to be blunt, there are suicides that happen after one bad day. And so just so you guys, just so you guys realize and understand, we're probably going to run out of time before I say this. So I'm just going to make this quick and just say that, like, just so you guys understand the gravity of suicide, there were 42,979 suicides that were tracked in 2020. That was the last time that the CDC has ever tracked the rate of suicide. And for every successful suicide that existed, there are 25 more that take place. That's over 1.1 4 million people. So I would say that the 1.4 that have attempted suicide are the people that have experienced the one bad day.
Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary situation. So whether it's through us, through Victims and Villains, or a therapist, or friends, or family, whoever you need to reach out to, the suicide hotline, like, there's always somebody who's willing to help and talk and get you through that one bad day. So I implore you, if you ever get to that point, please reach out.
Yeah, like this is the reason that we have conversations at panels like this. I love getting to meet new friends, and afterwards, if you guys want to high five me, please do that, because I love high fives. I'm just a really energetic guy, but again, like, this is the reason that we make content, is so that you guys understand that you are not alone. No matter how bad it gets, tomorrow is always going to bring sunshine regardless. And one of the things that we, to go off of the name, what we previously, the reason that we have an hourglass as our logo is because the hourglass that represents the beads of time represent the depression you're feeling right now, and eventually that depression is going to run out. So
I think that about does it for our
that
time.
is going to do it for us. Thank you guys.
Where can people find Victims and Villains, Josh?
Just go to search us on. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. We're Victims and Villains. If you guys need any mental health resources, I have them up here. So please come up. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, GalaxyCon.
And look, I also just want to, one last thing. This is one last thing. If you guys caught any panels today, yesterday, tomorrow, and you guys see those creators on that floor, I come from the world of music, and like, I always believe in giving credit where credit's due. Please stop them and say, hey, good job on your panel, because it's really hard to do what we do. So thank you guys so much. We've been Victims and Villains.
Thank you.